Morning after the Portland Pacific Office Automation 147 bin. Now that we've had a chance to sleep over this race and think about it, we talked about Cole Custer, how we were surprised he came from the back. But one of the things I started thinking about, AJ Allmendinger last year, rough start, was in the back, came through the front, got the win. Seeing that now Cole Custer has essentially done that, plus some race issues, missing the chicane at one point, fall a little further back. Is Portland the kind of road course where, compared to especially Road America, where caution seems to be very few, if you fall to the back, your race is over? Here, it just seems it's physical, fast enough where you could come back.
Well, I think that's just it. Joe, the amount of cautions, the amount of carnage that we've seen each of the last 2 years in two very different weather conditions, with dry this year and wet last year. I think that allows for more opportunities on restarts and for drivers that have maybe gotten shuffled to the back of the pack to be able to work their way back up to the front. I think that's what Cole Custer was able to do this year. It's what AJ Allmendinger certainly was able to do last year. We thought his race was done on the pace flaps almost with all the troubles that he was having, almost getting lapped in the first stage, and he still found a way to come back and take the win at the end of it. So, like I was telling you yesterday, we've only done two races here, so a little bit difficult to gauge at this point if it's the track or if it's just the culture of stock car racing nowadays and how aggressive these young drivers are. Maybe it's a combination of both, but I guess we'll know for sure in a few years once we get a few more races under our belt here.
And one of the things, as you mentioned, when it comes to aggressive driving, we saw that yesterday. Sheldon Creed, John Hunter Nemechek, they got into it. Then we see Sheldon Creed return the favor to John Hunter Nemechek. Then John Hunter Nemechek, him and Sammy Smith got together entering the Sheldon Cane. We saw some hot tempers, but despite all those issues, John Hunter Nemechek still a top 10 finish. We saw Sheldon Creed still have pretty good, strong, solid run, was in contention for the win up to the last lap, where a very aggressive move by Parker Kligerman essentially took him out of the picture. When it comes to John Hunter Nemechek, and especially the chaos he saw, getting a top 10 finish, his first in a road course, could he come off saying, okay, this feels like a win because we could have easily been further back, lose the points lead, or is this still a missed opportunity because they look like they're in position to win, especially stage number 2?
I don't think it's going to feel like a win, given all the run-ins that he had, one with his own teammate Sammy Smith there. So I think it was still going to come off feeling as kind of a rough day, and I think he's just going to be happy to salvage top 10 and decent points effort there. Although nowadays, of course, winning kind of trumps everything in the points battle and everything. But I think for Nemechek, obviously, we came into this race talking about his struggles in the Xfinity Series on road courses so far in his career, not having that top 10. I suppose now he has that, but at the same time, with dust up with Sheldon Creed, I think Nemechek was the least surprised out of anybody that he got the favor returned to him there. I think he was much more upset with what happened with his teammates. So going to be a very interesting competition meeting tomorrow morning at JGR. I think that's probably where his mind's going to be at right now. Just those missed opportunities and those run-ins, kind of costing him the opportunity. Certainly, I think could have been a contender for the win based on how he's running in the second stage. But that's where I think he's going to have to take a look at that and certainly sit down, certainly with his teammate and maybe Sheldon Creed as well, and try to discuss what happened and be able to put that behind him and move forward into the second half of the season here.
Now, one of the things we saw after the race, John Hunter Nemechek, he did talk to Sheldon Creed. A lot of folks were following him because there was concerns about him and Sammy Smith potentially going at each other. But then we saw the other end of pit road, Jeff Burton, the colleague team. They were unhappy with each other. And, of course, those two, particularly with Chandler Smith, getting a lot of contact in the race. And at one point, Jeff Burton getting spun. A lot of hot tempers. And we know Jeff Burton, his relationship with Chris Rice over at Colleague. Do you think that could be a little bit of bad blood, or just mainly what happened in Portland yesterday and the physical racing that they had?
Yeah, I'm not sure, what kind of terms they left on, whether they were good or bad, because obviously Jeff used to drive for Colleague Racing and was there for a season and got a win at Talladega out of it. But I think that it was very interesting to watch Chandler Smith all day. In particular, he certainly had a rough day. He was the one, correct me if I'm wrong, I think he was the one that got spun right in
Yep.
front of you on the opening lap, and then had to kind of work his way back from there. So I don't know if he just ran out of patience with Jeb Burton, and that's what sent him off course. And obviously, I think Jeb certainly had a right to not be too happy about that. But what happened in the pits afterwards was a very interesting situation. I think that even got a little bit more physical than the Gibbs teammates, which is where I know you headed to see what was going to go down there, because there was some tense words on the radio there. But certainly some tense words on Jeb Burton's radio as well, because he was not happy. And I kind of wish the TV cameras had done a little bit better job in following up with that story, because they kind of only got a first glance at it before Fox had to get off the air. I think Major League Rugby was coming on. He'd been bumped over to FS2 because the race ran a little bit long. So we'll see what comes of that as well. But I think certainly if you're Chandler Smith, kind of a weekend to forget, based on how your race ended and how your race started as well.
And I feel like you mentioned a race a lot of folks will want to forget. Essentially, Riley Herbst, not once but twice, the ARCA West and in the Xfinity Series race, engine goes bust out of the race. Daniel Hemrick coming to the restart, engine overheated. He was done for. We saw other drivers with mechanical issues. I was surprised to see, because this isn't like Talladega, the super speedway, the mile and a half where you're on the throttle full time. This is a road course. Do you think maybe the drivers were just a bit or the setups were just off, considering it was hotter, but we're still only talking high 70s during the race conditions?
I think a lot of people were very surprised at how many engine failures and mechanical issues and fires we saw this weekend in both races. You bring up a good point with Riley Herbst as well.
Mm-hmm.
That was a question that I asked Cole Custer in the post-race press conference was, how much did the extra laps in the West race help you for the Xfinity race? And he nearly pulled off the double. He had a great battle with Landon Lewis. Ended up coming home second in that race and then winning the Xfinity race. As far as I'm concerned, that could have been Riley Herbst winning on Friday as well. He had a great run in his number 5 car, but he was running as a one-off to try to do the same thing, get more laps for the Xfinity race on Saturday, and he ended up going up and smoking up in flames both times there. So it was an unfortunate weekend for him. I'm sure a weekend he'd like to forget. Dylan Lupton for sure in the West race, having that happen twice to him in that Bill McAnally car. So yeah, I mean there were more issues like that, and more fires certainly than I was expecting. Daniel Hemrick in particular, that happening under caution. Very surprising sort of deal there. So, we've been talking a lot about the next gen car and the fires we've seen there the last couple of years, and what needs to be figured out there. But I think the Xfinity teams and the West teams will certainly have a lot of questions as well as we kind of debrief this weekend here.
Yeah, and I know one of the big things, Portland International Raceway, it's not the biggest road course, under 2 miles, 12 corners, not a whole lot of elevation changes. But it seems that just lends to the beat and bang. Of course, the Sheldon chicane, that's always an area. But another calamity corner, that final corner where we saw Sheldon Creed get spin out. Then, of course, John Hunter Nemechek on the final lap, the number 43, after he had the driver change, crashed into the barriers. I don't know if the Fox TV crew picked it up, but we saw that in the garage area after the race. 2 races in, I know it's still very early. Do you anticipate, rain or shine, next year, we can anticipate another physical race? Because even when I was looking at the Indy cars, since they've been coming back, only one race has had 1 caution. The other races, 3 or 4 cautions each.
Yeah, well, first of all, my best wishes to Tom and Joe Martins and Alpha Prime Racing, and Leon Honeyman Jr. as well, dealing with some food poisoning, had to be replaced by Brad Perez in the middle of the race. And then I think Brad had a very strong run going until that last corner. So that's more crash damage for them to unfortunately have to worry about. And the whole deal with trying to get the haulers here. Tommy Joe Martins was spotting for Dylan Lupton when he went up and played. I mean, it was just a weekend from hell to forget for him and his Alpha Prime Racing team. So certainly best wishes for them for Sonoma. Hopefully things go a little bit better there. But, I think, like we talked about at the start, we've had 2 races and 2 completely different weather conditions here. Not a cloud in the sky yesterday, beautiful conditions. And then last year, absolutely awful conditions in the rain. And both times we've had a lot of drivers leaving with angry feelings and tempers flaring and things like that. So, again, I think that maybe that's just part of road course racing in the Xfinity Series these days, or maybe, we call it a Shelton Chicane or Festival Corners, whatever, Calamity Corner as well. It's a very tight section for these drivers to try to work through, and oftentimes, especially towards the end of the race. I mean, we saw it yesterday with Kligerman. I don't know that I can necessarily blame him for taking that chance in that move, but just overcooked it just a little bit, and that forced him off course and, really ended his chances of winning the race and opened the door for Cole Custer to come through. So, I think there's a combination of, maybe this is something that we're just going to see every time we go to Portland because of the track layout and the kind of racing that it allows for in whatever condition, or maybe it's also, drivers feel kind of invincible these days and they'll take those chances that maybe several years ago they weren't willing to take.
Yeah, that's always one of the things. The cars are getting safer. Portland International Raceway, despite a lot of grass, tire barriers. We saw Souza get that hard hit, get out of the car. The car relatively damaged, but it looks like you could still fix it compared to other tracks, especially the ovals. You might be done with that car, that chassis. Now, one of the big things this was the second race. We've talked about, particularly with the Clash. I know a lot of people are talking about North Wilkesboro, assuming it's on the schedule next year. That first race, big crowd. The second race, that's sort of going to be the indicator. We saw the Busch Light Clash, a little bit of a smaller crowd. They had some more banners, taping off sections of seating that weren't used. North Wilkesboro, I think a lot of people are going to be paying attention to that. But Portland, we saw another great crowd. Of course, much better weather conditions, but still last year, wet weather. Of course, this is Portland, Oregon. A lot of rain. A lot of folks were used to it. Then to have sunny weather. Do you think it's off to a pretty good start? And then would the third year be something where people are going to be looking at as, okay, the final year of the contract, where does Portland stand?
Well, Joe, you might know better than me since you're more familiar with the area, but I thought the crowd was great this weekend. And I thought the crowd was great last year, considering the weather. I was very impressed to see how many fans came out and braved the rain there. So I think that, Portland's certainly off to a good start here. I think it helped that, the track had IndyCar come back and even ARCA West come back in 21 as well to kind of prepare for this Xfinity venture that they've taken here. I don't know if the facility is cup ready. I know that there's not really like a true garage building. The haulers are just kind of parked in off the side of pit road there. But that would certainly bring some attention back to the market in the Pacific Northwest for NASCAR. But I think right now what they have with the Xfinity Series is very, very strong, and look forward to seeing what comes of it next year. And I would think if the crowds are strong enough, the drivers and fans certainly seem to enjoy the track. I don't know that they enjoy the commute on a Monday from Charlotte, rain delayed race to try to get out here. So they might try to look at staggering the schedule a little bit differently in years to come. But I think aside from that, once the teams get to the track, I think they put on a pretty good show, and I think the fans, certainly have to enjoy what they saw these last 2 years. Now, really, it's been great to see NASCAR back in this market, because I think it's a market that was really underserved over the last several years.
Definitely, it was a great crowd both days. Of course, we're not going to get attendance figures numbers, but I know last year, considering it was a wet weather race, the highest attended event for Portland International Raceway compared to IndyCar for the Xfinity Series race and ARCA Menard Series West. The numbers this year, I think, are going to indicate another strong showing, because we saw a lot of seats were taken. We know we had 2 concerts each night. I think overall we're going to see it's a big success, but it's going to be really interesting. I think it's interesting to bring up the point of the garages. North Wilkesboro didn't have a garage. Of course, the Clash doesn't. My concern that it's not cup ready. We still have concrete walls on both sides of that main stretch. Granted, I know the chances of a really hard head-on impact with the concrete wall is slim, but we saw Noah Gragson last year hit a puddle. He didn't hit it head-on, but still was a pretty hard hit. So that's why I feel that might be a challenge before it is cup ready. But it's going to be really interesting to see what happens with this track. Now, I know you're about ready to head on south to Sonoma, your second part of your West Coast swing. Overall, how will you rate the first part compared to last year, besides being much drier?
Yeah, well, I mean, that's the main thing. Like, you could not ask for better weather this weekend. It was really, really gorgeous outside, and track conditions I think were yeah, I mean, obviously you couldn't get much more different than last year, but still, really, really strong show. Both the ARCA West race, I think, had the finish of the year, arguably, in that series, and the Xfinity Series as well. A lot of excitement coming down to the wire. So we'll see. Both series are headed to Sonoma. I know the trucks went back last year. Xfinity's never been there before. It's going to be a brand new environment for most of those drivers and teams. So it's going to be interesting to see how they handle that. But it's an interesting dynamic as well, going from road course to road course on back-to-back weekends, and out here on the West Coast. Again, that goes back to my point of the last question about the scheduling. So it's a tough weekend for these hauler drivers and for these teams. But I got to tell you, if it's anything like what we saw at Portland this weekend, I think the fans in Northern California are going to be in for a treat just as much as the ones in the Pacific Northwest here were. So looking forward to seeing Brock in a few days and getting some footage and some articles up for NASCAR.info. In the meantime, Joe, thank you for allowing me to spend some time with you this weekend and come out here for Portland for the Grid Network. It was a great weekend. Looking forward to doing it again next weekend.
Definitely great to have you here, and of course we encourage everyone, hit the subscribe button here on YouTube, invest in us through Patreon, or buy me a coffee. Especially want to buy Ben coffees. You got a long drive ahead down south, but definitely we're going to be, of course, at Portland again for the Formula E race and then IndyCars later on. Thanks for watching, and big thank you to all our Patreon subscribers for making this possible. We'll see you later on another Grid program.